This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Some listeners may find the content distressing, as episodes may include discussions of violence, human trafficking, and other forms of abuse, including emotional, psychological, sexual, financial, and physical. In many cases, names have been changed to protect those involved. Please note that the statements and opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect my own. Hi, warriors. Welcome to Beyond the Statistics, formerly 1 in 3. I'm your host, Ingrid. Coercive control is a term that's been gaining more attention lately. But what is coercive control, and why is it at the core of abusive relationships? Joining me today is Tracy, coercive control expert and founder of Empower Ed, to help us better understand this critical concept. Here's Tracy. Hi, Tracy. Welcome to, oh my gosh, my new title, Beyond the Statistics. I almost said the old one. Thank you so much for joining me. So we're going to start this episode off this way.
Okay. Thank you for having me, Ingrid, regardless of the title.
Right. Well, we'll pick one and we'll go with it. Okay, so we're just going to have a chat about coercive control. But before we get into that, do you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself so listeners can get to know you some?
Sure. First and foremost, and I always identify, I'm a survivor. I think that is what probably has motivated me to get through school when I was an undergraduate, was when I was going through my abusive relationship. And it just kind of kept pushing me forward. I now have my master's in forensic psychology. I'm a late learner in life, but finished that about 4 years ago. And it really has, I believe that degree itself has really helped me kind of try and understand the mind of the abuser. Domestic abuse is just a cause that I'm passionate about because of being a survivor, but I also lost a niece 6 years ago to domestic homicide. So it's not only my profession, but it's definitely very personal for me as well.
Well, and I think the fact that you've been through it and because of with your niece, that just reinforces that truly everybody does know someone who has been affected by domestic abuse.
Absolutely.
I want to say forensic psychology is something that has always been a huge interest of mine. My sister, too, she's a social worker. And one of her dreams was at one point to go into forensic psychology. Who knows? Maybe it's still her dream. We're both in our 40s now. So I don't know if either one of us are going to take a massive change in our careers. But this is a total side note. We're both James Patterson, the author, fans, and he has a character, Alex Cross, who is he's a detective, but I believe his background is forensic psychology. So it's something that's so cool. We both love trying to figure out how the brain works and what causes people to do things. I got very stuck on my abuser after I got out of that relationship, trying to figure out why he did certain things, or did he understand he was doing certain things? And so I think that is just a fascinating profession.
I'm happy I chose it, and I was the exact same way. I always wanted to know why. And forensic psychology professors always knew, okay, Tracy, you're going to do a paper on domestic abuse. Go ahead and go for it. They always knew, because just with forensic psychology, you could tie it into abuse. So I'm really glad it was kind of that self-learning while learning in college as well. So I'm glad I had the opportunity to go for that degree.
Yeah, I'm happy that you did that. So, okay, we're going to talk mostly about coercive control, and it's a topic that has come up. Obviously, it's come up in almost every single episode because that's sort of the center of abuse. But I don't know that I've actually ever had anybody exactly explain what coercive control is. So, do you mind just taking us through all of it?
Nope. So I actually just did a training today for a hospice agency. And basically what it is my passion to get this terminology more well known is because, like you said, it's the core of domestic abuse. When I was doing my research and creating trainings for it, it was to help anybody stop asking that question, why don't you just leave? We all get that. Why don't you just leave? So it really helps explain that, because that coercive control, it's any of the forms of abuse, because it all has that common thread in there. They're trying to create that fear and intimidation to get that control. So that's really where it's at. And you see it through all the tactics. And the thing of it is, and why it's so important that we recognize it, is because right now our systems really just look at incidents. Oh, he hit her. Oh, there's a police report. Oh, he damaged her property. It's all that visible signs of abuse. And it's not those incidents, because what happens on the daily? Very little physical violence daily. We can't say that there are relationships that it is a daily thing, but most of them don't have the physical violence, because the abuser doesn't want to use that, because that's going to tie him to the abuse. Because what if she does report and there's bruises on her? He doesn't want that, because we have to remember he's the good guy out in society that people see. And when the survivor starts having these trauma responses to the coercive control, the abuse you can't see, he can then go, look, she's crazy. I told you she was crazy. So
Yes.
that's why it's so important. It's very covert, it's insidious, but we have to be able to teach the professionals to really recognize it, because that is our foundation of abuse.
And I think, okay, so people who have lived through it understand it. But I have found it's very difficult, even, well, especially I suppose now that I'm so far removed from that relationship. Sometimes it's even difficult for me to go back and try to figure out, why didn't I just leave? What was it that was keeping me there? So, have you found a way to be able to explain how are you afraid of someone who's never good gracious, how are you afraid of someone who's never laid a hand on you, who's never necessarily made an outward threat of, I am going to hurt you or I am going to kill you, but there's something there that is scary.
I think, it's that cycle of abuse that we go through. It's a lot of these relationships, they're not always bad. And it's those good times that the survivor dismisses the abuse, makes excuses for it, and thinking, oh, he's just had a bad day. And when you're in that cycle, initially, maybe that coercive control is very covert, because you don't understand what you're going through. People don't understand that domestic abuse is primarily psychological in what they do. It's almost like a brainwashing. Coercive control is about domination. They want that domination over that victim's life. So it might start out very covert and not understanding it, but as it goes through, it can lead to physical violence if there hasn't already been physical violence. But you start to believe that there is a credible threat. He's given those type of threats or that coercion to make you believe that there is a credible threat there. And that is where she doesn't leave. He may say, I'm going to take the kids. You'll never see the kids again. I'm going to report you to CPS for some bogus charges. It can be stuff like that. It doesn't have to be, bodily harm that he's threatening, which some of them will make those threats. But a lot of the time it's those type of threats. And, as a mom myself, the last thing you want to do is lose your children. So you start to believe him that it's going to happen, because he's kind of given you that reason. With that cycle of abuse in the good times and the bad times, they also have what some of the victims can have trauma bonds. And that was kind of another training that I went off to try and explain of why don't we just leave. And not every victim gets a trauma bond. There's kind of some pre-existing factors that can take place as far as if you've been in an abusive relationship before, you have a traumatic childhood, that can kind of set you up. And that trauma bond is just that push and that pull of positive and negative that starts to create that chemical attachment in your brain to your abuser. Same exact brain chemistry that substance abusers have for substances.
That makes sense because I had a guest who came on and said, I've never done drugs in my life, but every time I tried to leave my abuser, I felt like I was going through some sort of physical withdrawal.
Absolutely.
And it's
Absolutely.
and it's wild to think because can think drugs do change what's happening to you physiologically and your hormones and all these other things in your body are adjusting to this drug. And that's why you're getting this high. But with domestic abuse, when there is no physical, when it is just coercive control, you're not having any direct changes in your body. You are having stress hormone changes because psychological stress will do that. But it's really wild for me to understand that somebody actually can go through that same feeling of physical withdrawal. She would get physically sick
Yeah.
every time she tried.
Absolutely. You're just waiting for that email. You're waiting for that call. You're waiting for that text. And you're just sitting there. And I went through it. And I'm like, why am I like this? This is when I was still an undergrad. And a lot of the times when I talk about trauma bond, people look at me out in my audience and like, I have 9 heads. And I'm like, this is scientific proof. This is what can happen. It's not a, definite that it will. Again, some of those pre-existing conditions that someone may have kind of sets them up to have that push and pull and that brain chemistry react that way.
Do you have any suggestions for somebody who does have that really tight trauma bond? How do they go about breaking that? And I mean, we said, like I said, that woman said every time she left, that was multiple times that she left before she finally left. And that seems to be very typical. I know they say on average 7. I'm not sure if that's still the average, but that's how often it typically takes for somebody to stay gone when they leave. Um, are there any tricks to detox yourself, I guess?
No contact. Because, and that's not always, if you have children involved, that's not always an easy thing to do. I know some courts have set in place these apps that the talk between the parents are monitored, and that can help because the reason why we say no contact is because it doesn't give them a chance to get in there and give that positive reinforcement again to continue that attachment, or if she's broken it, she could start getting sucked back into it again. So honestly, no contact. Another thing that I tell survivors is abusers want that emotional reaction from the victim because then they know they're getting to you. Use the gray rock method. And if you are, like I said, let's face it, a gray plain rock is not pretty. It's just very flat affect. Don't give them that emotional reaction. And they're like, it's so hard. It is hard, but it's something that you're not born with to do. So it just takes practice with it. So if you have to be in contact with them, I always recommend practice that gray rock. Don't show any affect to them. Don't show any emotion because that's when they start to get amped up. So if you can just kind of deflect from that, they're not getting that emotion what they want. Hopefully they'll back off.
Right, because they're like parasites. They can feed off of your love and your admiration, but then they can also feed off of your fear, and they don't care what it is.
Absolutely.
I have a friend who is actually in the process of exiting her relationship. And I say in the process, she hasn't physically left yet. I don't know how long this is going to take before she officially breaks herself free. This has been, goodness, it's been at least a year that I've recognized it was a bad relationship. And it's strange being on the other side and being the supportive person and not saying, you need to just leave, just leave. Why aren't you leaving? Because I've lived through it all. Now I know what can happen. But he had not been physical at all. She believed he would never be physical. And my response to that is they're never physical until or I can't say never. Some of them just are physical because that's something they like. But sometimes they're not physical because they don't have to be physical. And it's once that control, they start to recognize that control is whatever they were doing before isn't working anymore. They need to do something else to step it up, to pull you back in, to keep you subdued.
Right. I always use the phrase, an abuser will only use as much abuse as it takes to get a victim into compliance. If she's not compliant and she starts pushing back, that can sometimes be when the physical starts, because then coercive control works so well because we have the memory and the anticipation that a credible threat is established. And so he's not going to need to use that physical violence if she has memory, the anticipation of what could happen. I remember the example that I give for memory anticipation is my ex-fiance, who was my abuser. He had a distinct sound to his car. And I learned at a certain time to take note of that in the day, that conditioning. And I started anticipating, what's his mood going to be like when he comes in? If he came in with a smile, I kind of deflated a little bit. Okay, we're okay. But then you never know. They want to keep you off balance like that. So he was never physical with me until the end. It almost got physical. What we have to let people know is coercive control can be just as deadly, if not more so. I think the statistic is 1 in 5 homicides, domestic homicides, have the first act of physical violence was that homicide.
Oh my goodness. I had not heard that one before.
Yeah. So people think, oh, it's only words, because people don't, that sticks and stones break, that we get conditioned to believe as kids. We need to forget that because it can be just as dangerous. And that meme on Facebook, broken bones heal. It takes longer for a mind to heal. That's coercive control. That's where you have those long-term impacts after. It's all that psychological. So, in the 70s, we had the burning bed where, that victim was severely beaten. All we saw was battered woman syndrome. So that's what we kind of made synonymous with domestic violence. It's 2026. We have to stop looking through that violence lens and start looking through that lens of coercive control, because that's truly what's going on the daily.
Yeah. And I think that victims, if you can listen to your gut, if you can listen to your body, what's about to happen. And the body knows. That same friend of mine whose partner had not touched her, had not gotten physical, never even postured himself as a threat to her. She was in her vehicle. They had made plans to do something. And so she just texted him and said, "Hey, you're gone. Did you already head down?" And he called and just started screaming at her. And she called me immediately and she said, "I don't know what's going on. My whole body is shaking. I can't stop shaking. I feel like I'm having almost like a panic attack." And I said, your body keeps memory of all of those verbal attacks. And even though it's never been physical, it's going to have that reaction because, again, all those stress hormones, everything's being affected.
Right. Exactly. And even years later, that can happen. You can be in a different environment, and if your body reacts to something that is a threat that was like in the past, you can still have all those physical symptoms again. And this is just really where, from the abuser's stance, we're all crazy, right?
Right,
The
of
victim's
course.
crazy. We don't need to follow that through in society, and professionals. We don't need to pathologize trauma. We need to help walk them through it to heal. There's no amount of medication that's going to take that away from her. It helps to be able to take the edge off maybe a little bit, where you can start to maybe work through the trauma. But we have to meet people where we're at, and we don't need to pathologize these victims, because again, if they're still going through it, being on these medications can really harm them in family court, because they're going to pull that and see, I told you she was crazy. Look at all these medications she's on. So
Right.
that's things that psychiatrists and doctors, they really need to understand. There's so many professions that we really need to work with to get us all on the same page of what domestic abuse is.
Yeah, and even if there isn't a long list of medications that they're on, just being in the same courtroom as somebody who has had control over you for so long is terrifying, and it's pretty common where the abuser can sit there calm and collected, and the victim is jittery, scatterbrained, flighty, everything that looks like they're unstable, and then they get labeled as the unstable person in that situation.
Even when you're going up, if you're getting a restraining order, part of this coercive control is, the look. He can give you the look once and you're going to recant. That's coercive control. Mine was, if I was talking too much, we were out, it was always the hand at the lower part of the back. That's when I knew to be quiet and we were going to leave. That's coercive control. That's that conditioning. That's that credible threat that, if you don't get back into compliance, there could be bigger consequences to it.
Goodness, that reminds me of if we went out for drinks or a date, even just a date, we weren't with other people and had a few drinks. The next day, there would be something, and I wouldn't be drunk. It's not like I was blackout drunk, but there would be something of, do you know you said this last night? Do you know how that's not okay? And I mean, that's gaslighting too. Sometimes it was something that I never even actually said. And I would sit there and I would think, did I have that much to drink that I can't even remember what I said? But goodness, even again, being so far removed from that relationship now, there are times if I go out for a couple drinks with some friends, the next day I wake up in a panic of like, okay, what did I do last night? Did I do anything? Did I say anything? Did I offend anybody? Is anyone not talking to me? It's so it's so horrible how these things just can can stay. I've done a lot of therapy, a lot of therapy. And I'm a lot better than I used to be, but there are still some things that I just can't shake.
If you look at the power and control wheel, we're so, this is emotional abuse, this is psychological abuse. If you look at that wheel, at the center is power and control. If you look at the wheel, it's all coercive control, because those tactics, those forms of abuse are put in there to psychologically create this fear and intimidation in the victim. The onslaught of maybe the verbal and the humiliating comments. It's the humiliation to beat you down, because if you're beat down, you're going to be easier to control, right? So you look at that power and control wheel, it's all coercive control.
Yeah.
And my biggest thing too is terminology. The countries that have already criminalized coercive control, United States is far behind. You'll
And a
see
lot
the
of
things.
things. And a
Yeah,
lot of things with yeah.
you'll see they say domestic abuse instead of domestic violence, because when you say domestic violence, what do you automatically go to?
Physical violence. Mm-hmm.
So domestic abuse, I think, just encapsulates it nicely and wraps it up, and that kind of involves everything. You'll start to see now where people bullet point the types of abuse and coercive controls in there, and I'm like, it's all coercive control.
Right. Yeah. You don't have to separately name it because it's just part of it. I think it's becoming one of the hot things to say, which it's fine. There needs to be more understanding and awareness of coercive control. But I think that's why it ends up getting separated, that it's its own entity.
Yeah.
So just to talk about these other countries, because I've seen that too, where coercive control can be something that's criminalized. How, with you knowing about all the things you know about coercive control, how easy or how difficult do you think it would be to get a conviction against somebody for coercive control?
So here's the sad part about it. When I'm reading and looking at other cases, like in Australia, they have coercive control criminalized. It's still the same. The lack of conviction of these abusers, whether it's physical and sexual, like we criminalize here in the United States, we're not doing a real good job at convicting them at that. So let's just bring the coercive control in. One of the tools me and Norma Peterson are going to be co-presenting at the NCVC conference in Chicago in September. I'm going to be talking about coercive control, and she's going to be talking about document the abuse. It is such an awesome tool, because that's when I start talking about coercive control and trainings. It's like, how do we prove this? Me as a survivor, even to this day, I have a problem journaling, because if my journal was found and I would have had stuff written down, that would have been it for me. This is where I document the abuse, because it's so secure. So with that being said, just like her sister-in-law, she went missing. If they unfortunately murder the victim, this is stuff that can hopefully stand up in court to show that pattern of abuse, because that's what we have to be able to establish. And when I was talking today with these nurses, I said, when you start to recognize coercive control, make sure you document the statements down. I said, we don't criminalize it here, but it can help to establish that pattern of abuse, because God forbid it does escalate and the victim ends up by being a domestic homicide, they can pull documentation into court. And I said, and as a professional, we should be documenting this. This is our license, because if someone turns around and says, why didn't you document this? You're like, here, I did. So if you don't document it, it didn't happen. So document.
Right. So I want to talk about that for a moment. You said you were with a hospice company?
Yes, I'm doing a couple weeks of training with a hospice agency.
Okay. So I think that a lot of times, now that we're starting to understand the terminology of coercive control, people tie it to intimate partner violence, and that's where coercive control lives.
Yes.
So working with a hospice agency, are there other places that coercive control can exist that, if you're not necessarily in an intimate partner relationship, you can actually be thinking, hold on a second, this is coercive control?
And where domestic violence is defined state by state, everybody goes right to intimate partner violence. Most states have it documented that it can be an intimate partner, a spouse, a boyfriend, girlfriend, or it can be an ex, or it can be a housemate that you've had, somebody that you've lived with. It can be your children. It can be a family member, household member. That can all be considered domestic abuse. So that's where I try and remind them, this is not just only between intimate partners, this coercive control, because a lot with seniors, when we're looking at that abuse in later life, that they're a vulnerable population. And if it's their child that is financial abuse, obviously they can make those threats, and that parent's going to be, oh my gosh, they are going to hurt me. So it can be right there too. It can be applied to all the populations, and we really need to make sure that we look at it outside of just intimate partner violence.
And so when you mention documenting, either as it's happening to you or as a professional documenting for somebody else, or you're a loved one and you're witnessing your loved one go through this, what are things that you need to be paying attention to? What are some of the things that you should be documenting?
Some of the things, if they are being isolated, say you are a family member and all of a sudden you get these repeated cancellations from the person that you don't know is being victimized, but that may be okay. What's going on? That should kind of be a red flag. If they're saying, one of the case studies I give today, and it was in a palliative care setting that went to a hospice setting because the case study individual had metastatic cancer. And what I was trying to get them to see is I would put just little blurbs on there. And the one said, when she entered into palliative care, she was more concerned about her spouse than she was about her cancer. When she had, going to go see a family member, it was always, you need to cancel that. I said, these are the kind of things that are very covert that you need to look for, because if you have them documented, they're not incidents, there's patterns there. That's that trying to establish that control. Another big one was she was complaining of back pain. The spouse dismissed it, and when she went into the doctor about the back pain, that's when the cancer was diagnosed.
Oh,
So
my goodness.
that can be a lack of care, preventing you from getting health care. He made threats to her that if he was not involved with phone calls with the doctors, that he was going to take away her health insurance.
Oh my gosh.
So these are the kind of things that, and one of the funny things that we talked about too in this case is when she was going to the oncologist, he was with her for every visit. When she came over to palliative care and she was going to see these people more routinely, he didn't make the visits. But then if there was a call made without him, that's when he kind of would break into. He went as far as even, accusing this poor victim of being unfaithful, of infidelity. So these are the things, and I think she had said one time, I think my partner's abusive. And, again, you can't make somebody leave. And when you're in that vulnerable of a situation, you can safety plan with them. You can give them resources. You can move them into an inpatient hospice setting. So there's things in each population that we can do as soon as, I believe, a victim's stories are just a core, the answer to our coercive control, because things that they don't say that they're trying to tell us. And when I say that, I don't know if you ever listened to that 911 call that Nicole Brown Simpson made about a year before she died. There were so many telltale symptoms in there. She was so scared. He's going to break in my back door. Oh, you're going to hear him here in a minute. It is the most saddest, thing to listen to. But if we would known then about coercive control, could her life have been saved?
Right. And actually, if you think about it, the victims who are in it right now, they're not necessarily even going to recognize that they are being controlled. It's coercive, it's insidious, like you mentioned. So a lot of times it does take somebody from the outside recognizing the signs to be able to start giving that person the support and the guidance that they need. It's not going to help if you shame them into your why have you not left yet? They're already living a life where they're being shamed and put down.
Absolutely. And that is the biggest thing. Just be there. What can I do to help you? Offer them the resources, because you never know when is going to be that time that they say, okay, I can't do this anymore. Here's my resources. I have a support system. It's heartbreaking when you do have those victims that say, none of my family will talk to me. They were mad because I wouldn't leave. And I'm like, it only creates another barrier that she has to try and break.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Are there other parts of coercive control? I feel like we could talk about examples and everything all day long, but are there key points that you wanted to hit that we haven't talked about?
I think one of the points that came up today, and it's very important, is and primarily what they say, 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men are impacted by domestic violence. If we look at statistics, what is our statistics based on? Physical violence, because we pull that through what the police reports, what's been reported. Someone asked me today, but if men can be victims, can they also be, victims of coercive control? I said, absolutely. And it's where, when you're looking at the statistics, it's a pretty high percentage of men versus women, where men are at a higher range for verbal abuse from their abuser than what women are from men. Coercive control. I said, a woman, she's probably going to try and be controlling. I said, it goes both ways. When I started doing research, one of the things that popped up is that women were the ones impacted by it more. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not sure if I agree with that. Because if it's the non-physical, because obviously men are most of the time more physically overpowering than the woman is. So I'm just not sure if I'm really on board with that.
Oh, I agree with you. I just had an episode about male victims of sexual assault and domestic violence and abuse. And the woman who I had on, she's from the United Kingdom, and she worked in law enforcement for many years. So she's seen all of it. She wrote a book called Men Ignored, and it was a great conversation. The statistics she was saying, this is what's reported though. I mean, you look at women are probably more likely to report abuse. I didn't report. I never got police involved with mine. So even women aren't reporting 100% of the time. And then you think of the stigma of men not wanting to admit what happened to them, or maybe not even recognizing what happened to them, because society also downplays what happens to men. And so I had just one clip on social media, I put it on all my social media, but my Instagram account is what got the most traction with this one specific clip about men being victims. And it's incredible. It makes my heart sad, but it also makes me so proud of these men. Men are just coming out saying, this happened to me. This happened to me. And it's just one after another. There were a couple of days I'm like, I can't even keep up with all of these comments, because I want to validate them and I want to acknowledge what they're saying. And I'm trying to go through and reply to every single one of them. But there were so many. So I'm not sure that I agree either, because, physical is one thing. The coercive control, the quiet abuse, that's something completely, I believe, is definitely underreported.
With, the agency that I worked for in Illinois, I was really proud of the fact, because we were only one of a handful of shelters that would also accept male victims. And when the hotline, because I was out there, I did community education, so I was out there educating. Evidently, something was resonating because they contacted me and they're like, Tracy, we just had an influx of male victims. And not that I wanted to celebrate, but I was just like, yes, something's clicking. We put it out there. Again, it's just kind of, you never know what's going to stick with people. You never know what's going to resonate. And so that had some type of effect because they were coming out of the communities and saying, hey, you know what? I don't deserve this. I'm going to go to the shelter. And again, there's some shelters that won't take male children over the age of 13. How do you leave your child? You can't do that. So there's just so many things that we need to move forward in domestic abuse. It's, I think we're kind of at a stalemate here. Are we going to think differently of it if we can get people to understand coercive control? I think so. One of the biggest things when I would be out doing presentations in the community, I never knew who was in my audience. And when I start talking about coercive control, I have never seen brighter light bulb moments in my life of people going, oh my gosh. So now we're able to name what they're going through. So that's really important too. And I think just with that type of response, that's what's kept me going with it. Because when I was doing the research, I'm like, this is my relationship to a T. Mm-hmm. This is crazy. Why was I never told this? So I'm really happy. I see more on LinkedIn. I see more of the agencies starting to bring it out. And I'm like, yes, this is where we need to be.
Yes. And now what we need is for our attorneys and our judges to really understand what coercive control is, because like you said, our friends across the pond are making coercive control something that can be criminalized, but you can have a law that says it's not okay. But if you don't have the right people in the right positions who are making those decisions on, is this coercive control? Everybody needs to really understand what that is. And I think that's where part of the drawback is going to be.
When I started a few years ago in Illinois, again, I live in Indiana. When I was in Illinois, there was actually a big push by the Illinois Bar Association to put the words coercive control in the definition. And that's a huge start to put those words in that definition of domestic abuse, because then that's kind of where those laws start to stem from. So I've started seeing they're maybe using coercion. I'm like, no, use coercive control. So that's a positive. And that was like 4 years ago. They knocked it down in the House and said, no, it's too much like stalking. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So we even need to go to the government bodies that make the laws and say, and educate them. But those are some of the hardest systems to break into. We're going to start small and hopefully go up from there. We'll use those national organizations that lobby and get that pushed.
Yeah. And start where people are more likely to hear: the victims, the family members, those who are actually living it. They're going to start grasping what coercive control is and recognizing it. And then go after the big ones, because you also have a lot of ego when you get up to that level.
Absolutely. That's the hard level right there. I mean, it's hard on the state. You're dealing with systems that there are such big power imbalances in that, here you want to come make this change. And if they don't understand it, though, how are we going to reach that?
Right. Okay. So anything else? Did we miss anything else?
I don't believe so. I think we hit on everything, the statistics, the male and female victims. So.
Okay. So if anybody wanted to reach out to you or learn more about what you're doing, how would they do that?
I have my website, because I do have my company called Empowered from Awareness to Accountability. That's my platform. Is okay, we have awareness. What do we do next? as simple as not saying victim shaming statements. That awareness has brought that, but that's shown accountability of society not to do that. But they can reach me on my website. It's empowereddv.com.
Okay. And is that designed for organizations? Is that for individuals? Is it for both?
So I will do anybody. It's set out more for professionals, those that are in contact with DV survivors, but I will do, let's face it, there's so many professions that come in contact. We need to do them all, but I would never refuse anything that is in the community. I don't charge for, because I think it's just that important. Anything, if it's a victim reaching out to me, I'm more than happy to try and help advocate for them or just talk with them. So they can usually reach me on there. It's got my email and it'll come to my email. I can help them that way.
Perfect. All right. So then in closing, do you have any final words of wisdom or encouragement that you would like to leave with listeners?
I think you kind of hit on it. If you have a gut feeling, that gut is telling you something so important. And I know if you're in a situation and you're being gaslighted, that is kind of your brain giving you the warning signal. Please listen to it. It's hard to leave. Leave when you can. Leave when it's safe. And there's people out there that will support you. Don't listen to the abuser. There's people that care and people that support.
Well, thank you so much, Tracy. Those are great words. And this was a fantastic conversation. And I'm very appreciative of your time.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you again, Tracy, for joining me today. And thank you, warriors, for listening. You can find the links Tracy was referring to, as well as her Beyond the Statistics profile, in the show notes. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong. And wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone. To learn more, explore episode resources, browse the collections, or register as a guest, visit beyondthestatisticspodcast.com. If today's episode meant something to you, please share it with someone who may need it. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow Beyond the Statistics on social media. Beyond the Statistics is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.